My name is Chris Nixon. I'm an EFPBC member. Our chair is Jay Nardone right here, and sitting to his left is our architect, Charlie Hay, with TAPE Architects. Superintendent Frank Hackett is with us as well as some other members. I'll ask them to stand up or raise their hand in a moment. What I thought I would do tonight, this is sort of an encore performance of something we did Thursday morning over at the Town Hall Auditorium. A little differently than we've approached it in the past with long PowerPoint presentations. We've really been working hard to build a community tool for this project, which is a website. You can find it at lynch2025.com. And I'm going to use this website tonight to just hit a few highlights, mostly so you can understand where we are today and also where you can go back to when you're looking for updated information. And then I'm going to hand it over to Charlie to get into some of the design and planning details, and he'll throw it back to me for some closing thoughts. We have some new information for you tonight that actually came up after our presentation Thursday morning, so that's exciting because things are really sort of starting to happen. So if you go to lynch2025.com, this is what you see. You've got a welcome page. We're providing a few facts and figures on the building in terms of the number of classrooms, for both K through 5 as well as preschool, and the size of the building. It's over 103,000 square feet. And I've got an image carousel here that will update from time to time as images get developed. You'll always find on the home page this blue banner that's kind of a what's new update. Sometimes this is just an indication of an upcoming EFPBC meeting. Tonight it mentions our informational session. So on some occasions it will announce an MSBA board meeting, for instance. Let me just keep going. We get into kind of some chronological order here. These little tiles you see on the website, these are not weekly updates by any measure, but every 2 or 3 months, when we kind of complete a chunk of work on the project, we summarize that here, and in some cases there's some links to the work that you can find. And as I said, it's chronological. So if we start scrolling back to where we were, gosh, almost a year ago, you start to see some of the early planning options on the project, some of the early site investigation work with our geotechnical engineer on site. And you'll always find at the bottom a bulleted schedule on the project. You can see the many milestones we've already accomplished and what's coming. So that's your homepage. I want to say a couple of words about who the project team is. So the EFPBC stands for the Educational Facilities Planning and Building Committee. We are a standing school building committee established by town meeting. We've got 13, 14 members. It's a fantastic and diverse group. So architects, engineers, contractors, space programmers, project delivery folks. We have attorneys with expertise in design and construction. So it's a group that I think has a lot of relevant professional experience that they bring to these projects. Jay has been on for how many years? 15? 17 years. So thank you for your service. You can find the list on the website. We are your peers. We're your friends and neighbors in Winchester, so if you have questions about the project, you can certainly reach out to any of us. But in addition to the EFPBC, of course, we have an architect. That's TAPE Architects. They were the architects of record for the Vincent Owen School, and prior to that, Ambrose Elementary. You'll find on the website some links to the many consultants that work under Charlie's direction, engineers, traffic consultants, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, the educational programmer. These are all live links, so they will take you actually to the consultant's website, and in some cases specifically to their portfolio of work in the K-12 educational space. But there's another important team member, which is Hill International. Andy Vo is here. He's the project manager. We call Andy our OPM. That's some alphabet soup from the Mass School Building Authority. Because we are working with the MSBA on a core replacement project, we're required to have an independent third-party owner's project manager. And so Andy and his colleague Vivian Varbedian join us at every EFPBC meeting, and we're pleased Andy can be with us tonight. Andy and Vivian are kind of our interface with the MSBA. They handle a lot of the direct communication with them and some of the feedback when we submit packages on the project. Some of you in the room are very familiar with the process with the School Building Authority, but for those who aren't familiar, a brief description of this process. And if you want to know more about the MSBA, we can go to History, MSBA, and the Master Plan. It's really a financial incentive. That's why we partner with the MSBA. We partnered with them on VO back in 2010, and we got a $10 million facilities grant. So that was $10 million we did not have to borrow to build the school. And at Winchester High School, this is a MSBA project. Turned out fantastic. It was a $44 million grant. And as you'll learn later in the presentation, we're anticipating a little over $17 million coming from the MSBA to offset the cost of the new Lynch Elementary School. But you can learn more about the MSBA's core replacement program, their history, and kind of what the criteria are. If you want to really go back and understand how Lynch fits into literally the big picture, there are some links to the district's 10-year facilities master plan as well. With that, and Charlie's going to give you much more information tonight, but we have a web page on the site. I quoted Jay here on the website. He once described this as the largest and yet most restricted site the EFPBC has ever worked with. It's over 18 acres, but it's very wooded. Parts of it have been subject to flooding. We've got the existing building that has to be abated and be taken down. We, of course, have a lot of parking constraints. It's adjacent to Horn Pond Brook, so we have riverfront area. We have some conservation concerns as well, environmental concerns. We have a floodway and a floodplain and so forth. So it's really a challenge to work with. You also see in the middle of this picture kind of that square shape that says Water Department land. In the 1930s, the town developed a drinking water well field, I think 27 wells in this area. It was abandoned in the late 1950s when we partnered with the MWRA, and in the early 60s, the pump house actually burned to the ground, but for those who want to walk through the woods, you can find the foundations there today. That's on the site because that was a major restriction for us. All of the land around it was under the control of the school committee, but that central parcel was not. That was under the control of the select board. So at last Springtown meeting, about 6 months ago, the select board requested and town meeting approved a transfer of that well field parcel to the school committee so that the MSBA could move forward with us. They want to be sure that any land we need for the project is under the full control of the school committee. So some interesting history there and a little floor plan of the footprint in case anybody wants to go digging around looking for it this winter. A very quick summary of the site plan that Charlie will share with you in more detail. And I'll trace it out here, and maybe Charlie can do the same when he presents. But if you see this kind of faint red outline, we are looking at the existing Lynch today, sort of relatively south in this open area with parking, and then the new building here. So you can get an appreciation for why that well field parcel was necessary. We have a design page that we're excited about, and this also changes from time to time. At the top, we kind of describe where we've been through conceptual design and the many different options that we were required to evaluate with the MSBA. Those included not just a new build, but a renovation and an addition of the existing. We have some floor plans, some key plans for you that show kind of how the program stacks throughout the building. It is a 3-story building. It's about 103,000 square feet. Our youngest learners on the floors below, our oldest learners on the floor above. And Charlie will get into more detail with you shortly. We will try to keep these current with some images as they are developed. These are all, they look very finished, but they're not. These are extremely conceptual, as Charlie will remind us tonight. Looking forward to expanding this a bit. Our project goals are many, aside from the educational program that was really led by Dr. Hackett and our consultant with input from teachers and staff. It's really important to this project that we follow the goals of Winchester's Climate Action Plan and the Decarbonization Plan for Massachusetts by 2030 or 2035. We're going to beat either one of those. This project is going to be an all-electric building, so we'll not rely on natural gas or heating oil, which is exciting. And our goal is for a net zero energy building as well. And Charlie will kind of describe to you in a few minutes how we do that. But once again, just like the home page, we have some chronology here. So if folks want to understand how we got to where we are today, all you have to do is scroll, and you'll find what the final 2 options were before we picked one. Prior to that, the final 4, then the final 6, and at the beginning of the process, we were actually looking at 11 different options that we brought forward to the community. Before I hand it off to Charlie, I also want to say this is a very interesting page, and it's actually quite a popular page. I'm a Morocco parent myself. We're not forgetting about Morocco. Town meeting appropriated $3.6 million about a year and a half ago to extend the life of Morocco until it can be replaced. We hope sometime between 2028 and 2030. If you want to learn more about that work, click on the YouTube link. You'll see the presentation. The roof work is actually happening right now. Meg White from Engineering and Planning is our point person on that for the town. And so the roof work is going on, the masonry work is going on, and we have a lot of electrical work planned at Morocco in the summer. So we'll work hard to kind of keep that current as well so that the Morocco community knows they're not being left out. So with that, Charlie, I'm going to pause and go back to the home page and ask you to come up, and I want to launch your PowerPoint. How about that? Want to take over? Sure. Use the mouse if you like.
There we go. Yeah. Good evening. I'm Charlie Hay. As Chris said, I'm going to walk you. So Chris he got the cool interactive aspect of this. I get the boring PowerPoint aspect of this, but I'm going to walk you kind of through where we are with the design. As Chris mentioned, we're still in the preliminary stage. The kind of design in earnest will begin once the project has been approved, but we have had a relatively robust initial design phase, because the MSBA really asks for that in order to kind of ensure that we've settled on an accurate and good budget, and that we really understand the scope. I'm going to walk you through the plans and the layout. You've seen it. You saw it on the website, so you're already familiar with it. This is kind of an aerial view of how we imagine the project, and any of you who live close at hand, if it's your neighborhood, you can see it here. And as Chris said, the existing Lynch sits right south of where the proposed Lynch is being placed. The new building will be between the parking, pickup and drop-off and play on the south of the building, essentially where the Lynch sits now, and the existing soccer fields. So it becomes a little bit more of a campus. It's a little bit more connected between the soccer fields to the north and kind of the south, the site to the south. The vehicular access will come in through the same locations it does now. The site plan you just saw on the website, we have to the east, coming off of Horn Pond Brook Road, we have access coming in and a pickup and drop off on the easterly side of the site, and we also off of Pond Street have a pickup and drop off on the westerly side of the site, so that we can continue to have two different ways in and off and on to the site. And the hope is to limit through traffic or prohibit through traffic. That's going to be kind of an operational question. There will be more parking than there is now, which is exciting. And we think that this plan should help with the kind of traffic congestion that the school deals with today. In front of the building, there will be an outdoor classroom. There'll be a kind of multi-age, fairly large play area. There'll be a turf field, which can be used by the school. It's not intended as a recreational field. It is intended as a school field, but for outdoor play. And then to the north of the building, there's also outdoor learning areas. And then there's also a small play area all the way up. Oops, sorry. Let me go backwards. Forgive me. There's I don't know why this mouse isn't working the way. Oops, no. Well, I did it again. So I can't use this mouse without clicking the slide. But to the north up there, there's a little small brown square. That's another play area, which is adjacent to the soccer field. So, you know, if you have a child who is playing a soccer game, but their younger sibling is not, they can play at the same time. So that's a nice feature as well. So there, Chris also mentioned the sustainable design aspect of this and working to meet the town's goals for a net zero building. So we have set out net zero as a goal. We anticipate an EUI of 25 or lower. It is an all-electric building. and a target right now of a LEED Gold building. It will require, as any of these buildings do, to get close to that goal, on-site generation of energy, and we intend to do that through solar. And that will be a combination, we imagine, of both roof-mounted solar panels and some canopy-mounted solar panels on the ground. And that's being developed now. There's a solar study that's actually underway and ongoing, which is looking at different options for how to configure that. The images on the right are just from different projects showing you kind of some of the possibilities for ground-mounted and roof-mounted panels. So that will continue to develop as the project develops. The building is laid out really effectively for solar because it's on an east-west axis and it faces south and really follows the arc of the sun through the day. So here are the plans. And this is the first ground floor. You enter through the main entrance down here, the lobby, the large lobby on the left. You immediately, you're greeted. There's a control point. You can't get into the building without being let into the building. But once you're there, you immediately have access to the cafeteria and easily have access to the gym. So those kind of big public functions are readily available to the public and to the community, both during school time, but also after hours and on weekends, because the rest of the building can actually be closed off, and we can just limit the use of the building to that area. But this first floor is our early learning floor. Those kind of peach-colored boxes are kindergarten. The far right boxes in yellow are the preschool, pre-K. Pre-K actually has its own entrance, and it actually has its own controlled entrance and its own administration. So it really acts as its own, has a fair amount of autonomy, and acts as its own, kind of preschool program. It will also have its own area for pickup and drop-off, and so that's works very effectively. Of course, those students will still have access to all of the functions within the building. But we have a nice kind of area for them on the first floor. It also obviously is easy to get out to play and easy to get in and out for when the children with the smallest legs, and they also are on a different schedule. The large brown box here next to the lobby is the main school administration, so that of course has offices, the nurse, and the like. The blue box up there is music, which is fairly close to the platform stage and the gym for performances. And it's also nice to have that kind of space on the first floor just to make it visible to everyone. That lobby also acts as a two-story public lobby, because on the second floor, if you go up the main stair, you immediately get to art and you immediately get to library. So those functions as well, you can close off the rest of the academic wing, and those functions as well can be used by the community either during school or after hours. If you're going to your child has an art show, you can go right up the stairs and go to that. If there's a meeting that wants to use the library, that's easily accessible, and that's obviously accessible by both stairs and an elevator, and can be used after hours in the evening. So this floor is our lower elementary, so grades 1, 2, and 3. The blue boxes in the middle are first grade, and they get their own kind of area as a kind of transition between early learning and the kind of older grades of 2 and 3. And then on the right there, you see in green and in red, you see the second and third grade classrooms, and they really have a breakout space area, which is pretty neat. So you can bring students out of the classroom into a kind of shared academic area for small group learning or individual study, one-on-one study. And in the middle between the two wings on each floor is a teacher planning zone, which for teacher meetings, for teacher collaboration, also can act as a copy room and a small break room. And hopefully it has kind of sight lines to the corridor. And then on the upper floor is our oldest students, the upper elementary, grades 4 and 5, with 4th grade in the middle there, and those purple boxes on the far right being the 5th grade. And the 5th grade has a really nifty situation. It's its own kind of little academy up there, and they actually have access to a roof a roof area for to be used as an outdoor classroom. Hopefully part of that might be a green roof. It will probably have a solar canopy above it to protect it from too much direct sun. And that's a kind of great sort of transition. That's typically academically and curriculum-wise a transition year between elementary and middle. You start to see a change in curriculum and pedagogy. So it's great to give them their own sort of zone the way we did the smallest children. So your experience at the school is bookended from your earliest days there to your last year there in a nice way. There's also a STEAM lab on the 3rd floor that can be shared by all the students. The presumption it will be shared probably most likely by grades 1 through 5. There's a kind of overlook into the library. So those are kind of the plans, and that's the way it's organized now. There's restrooms on each floor, of course, and there's special education classrooms that generally, and also small group spaces throughout the building in a kind of central location close to the stairs, easily accessible. So the exterior will be developed more fully as the building gets designed more fully, but we're beginning to look at how the building will be organized, trying to think about how we can break the scale down a little bit. It's a big school. It's a big elementary school. So how do we break the scale down a little bit and make it feel not quite as large? And we can do that by sort of creating kind of bays and creating smaller elements within the larger mass of the building. But here's a good image, too, that shows you that sort of central green in the sort of green common area in the middle of the site plan, which is really quite a large space. I mean, we think it's maybe 3/4 of a football field. I mean, it's pretty big. And I think that'll be a wonderful sort of organizing element for the site and the site plan. Here's a view of the building from the front. You can see the cafeteria on the left, which is a nice bright space with plenty of light. The classroom wing on the far right. Here's the rear, and you can see the soccer field, one of the soccer fields, one of multiple soccer fields. And that play area I mentioned previously, you see the gym on the right. You see those bays on the left, and the bays actually have a little bit of a shape to them, which helps us kind of break down the scale of the building. It also creates on the inside for the upper 2 floors sort of a little breakout zone within the classroom, which may be used for, again, by individual study or small groups working together. And then right in the middle there, in the foreground of this image, you kind of see a paved area that is intended as kind of a multi-purpose outdoor classroom courtyard space. And then you can see, again, another view a little bit closer to the ground, looking up at the building a little bit. You can see the stairs that allow access to the roof. So on the interior, I mentioned this kind of public aspect of the lobby. This is coming about halfway into the lobby and looking out the back door at the soccer fields. And on the left, we see the gym, and on the far left, we see those stairs I mentioned that go upstairs. Which allows the students to go up anytime, but also allows public to go up to access art and library above. We have some spaces for seating and perching. Kids love to perch, kind of settle on something and hang out, and it's nice to create spaces that can kind of enhance interaction between students, maybe on an impromptu basis. We're thinking about some green, living walls, hopefully, and some planters, trying to bring some of the nature inside, make it kind of connect the outside and the inside. There will be a good considerable amount of glass in terms of windows and skylights in these kind of spaces, so they're bright and engaging. This is a fully accessible building. There's a ramp here. There's an elevator in the building. The site will be fully accessible, so it will meet handicap code. This is turning your back away from the soccer field and looking back towards the main entrance, and again you're seeing that view in a different direction, and you look upstairs, you see art up there. And hopefully we can have some display cases and the opportunity to show student work, which is going to be nice and engaging for the lobby. And then this is, as we arrive into that upper floor, we can see up close where we are, looking back down into the lobby or looking towards the second floor of classrooms, grades 1, 2, and 3. and starting to think about how we can develop some graphics that'll help with identifying where you are in the building if you're a student. Or if you're a visitor, and then above you can see students looking out through a glass wall from the upper level down into this lobby space. This is the cafeteria. Again, lots of glass, opportunities for light, opportunities for views. And then these are these kind of common spaces in the hallways. This is cubbies on the lower level, the early learning classroom wall. We're hoping to kind of create sort of identifiable themes graphically that kind of tell kids where they are and make them feel like they're part of one team or another within the building. We'll work more on that, but that we can do through identifying elements like a fox, or we can do it through colors. And on this lower level, it's about the cubbies. As we go up on the second floor, you can start to see where we have areas where you can actually come out and work in the hallway, which is kind of pretty neat. And we've done this successfully in other elementary schools. And then when we get to the top floor, we have that space for the 5th grade where they can actually go outside, which could be pretty great. So I think the building is trying to take advantage of these circulation spaces to create learning spaces that are sort of bonus spaces and give a little bit of flexibility and create some other interesting opportunities for teaching and learning that wouldn't occur otherwise and are not sort of feeling like institutional hallways. So those are kind of the images, and of course we still have cubbies on every floor. Kids need places to put their books and their jackets. And then a typical classroom on the lower level. And then I'm going to move briefly into a project schedule and talk about how we think and how we have talked about the schedule working for this project. This is kind of an overall conceptual schedule, and we're in October of 22, so we've gotten through the feasibility and schematic design phase. You have a town meeting funding vote sometime on or after November 10th, and if that passes, you'll have a ballot vote on January 7th. Presuming it does pass, we'll proceed directly into the next phase of the design, which is really the 3/4 of the design work is left to be done. We've really not even scratched the surface in many ways in terms of developing the plans. But the intent is to have a bid next fall, a year from now, and a construction start by the beginning of 2024, and then an 18 or so month construction schedule that allows the building to be complete in the summer of 25 in preparation for move-in in late August, early September of 2025. So that's the overall kind of conceptual schedule. Obviously, students will have to be relocated to swing space. They're not going to remain on campus during construction. The site will be emptied. So the intent is to have swing space available for the duration of construction. And that's kind of how it's organized. It's subject to being more fully developed, but that's the current planning thinking around the schedule. And that's, I think, the full extent of my part of the presentation. And I think Chris is going to share more information from the website. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Charlie. Several things to talk about to sort of wrap this up before we open it up to Q&A. Charlie's point about schedule and moving students off-site. We do have a page called Swing Space, Traffic, and Safety. We developed a couple of options for swing space for town meeting in the spring. One was to renovate the carriage house behind the Ambrose School, have that be a permanent home for central office, which would free up Parkhurst, but we were not successful in getting that funded. So there was a plan B, which was to utilize Parkhurst but bring in some additional modular classroom buildings, much like the ones we have behind Morocco today and behind Ambrose. And so that's the option that we're pursuing. We don't have a lot to show you graphically because the design and management team is working hard on that right now, as is Dr. Hackett. Our central office is located there today. So a lot of work is going into figuring out where can central office go in the interim and what kind of spaces can be freed up. But I would encourage you to visit this site as it develops. We're going to put a lot more information here to tell you what Parkhurst is really like today. It's not a new idea to use it as swing space. This is really how Parkhurst got its second life. It was built in 1948. It was expanded about 4 years later. Very similar to the Mystic School, for those who are familiar, either through Kids Corner or the rec department. Two-story building set into a hill, very similar in size. We will need some additional modular classroom buildings, but the buildings are really in quite good condition, and as of this fall now fully accessible. We just put in a brand new elevator, accessible bathroom, hardware, accessible routes, and so forth for students and staff who need that. This last blue bar down here I also want to put in a plug for. In 2018, the Select Board voted a policy that for all major school expansion projects associated with enrollment growth, and certainly Lynch is no exception, the town sought to find opportunities to make safer travel for vehicles and pedestrians and bicycles. And so the first outcome of this is all the work that you've probably seen around McCall Middle School or the Unitarian Church. So they narrowed Mystic Valley Parkway, completely reconfigured the intersection of Washington and Main to slow traffic. I'm a middle school parent now, no longer a Morocco parent. I think the outcome has been terrific. We were able to fund that on our own, however, because that was not an MSBA project. So the Select Board has the same aspirations to make some important neighborhood improvements on either side of the site. Although that will not explicitly be a part of this project, that effort is ongoing. So I'll put in a plug. If you go to winchester.us and you're interested in this, go to the government calendar. Our town manager, Beth Rudolph, is actually hosting a couple of meetings tomorrow night over Zoom. The first is at 6 o'clock from 6 to 7 for those who are interested in the recommendations on the Horn Pond Brook side of the site. You can learn more from the town's traffic consultant and offer some feedback. And then later that evening from 7:30 to 8:30 on the Brantwood Pond Street side, similar opportunity. So the town is looking to continue to advance that work, and I'm sure we'll learn more about that as that evolves. We all want to know what this is going to cost. So this has really evolved quite a lot in the past month. The construction cost, what we think of as just the stuff, so excavation, foundation, structure, roof, finishes, the things we can see that we can touch in a building contribute substantially to construction cost. So the cost for that new building that Charlie just described to you is a little over $65 million. However, the total project budget is considerably more. It's between $94 and $95 million, and I'll describe to you in a moment how we get there. We do anticipate an MSBA project grant of over $17 million. And so if, in fact, we should find that we spend every penny of the project budget, which we hope not to do and what we've not done in the past, when we subtract that MSBA facilities grant, we get to a total net project cost of around it should be close to $77 million and hopefully less. The new information that we just got last week also comes from management and the Select Board, and that is, so what does it mean to me? What does it mean to you as a residential property owner and taxpayer? So the Select Board, on the advice of management, will ultimately make decisions about whether we bond for 20, 25, 30 years. As we all know, this is a peculiar time with escalating interest rates. We just added 75 basis points recently. So we have some consultants who work with management, and they are projecting a 5% interest rate for bonding in the spring. They're recommending a 30-year, at this time, they've modeled a 30-year borrow. So I'll walk you through that in a moment. But with a number of assumptions baked into it, we can assume the residential impact would be $54.87 per $100,000 valuation. And I'll show you a little more of that in just a moment. For folks who want to understand more about, well, what's the difference between construction cost and project cost, and how does it go from one number so quickly to another? The Lynch project, as I mentioned, the new build is around 65, but in addition to that, we're putting about $500,000 into Parkhurst as upgrades for swing space. We count that as construction because it's a permanent investment, and we counted it the same way for VO back in 2011. We do need to abate and demolish the existing Lynch. But beyond that, a number of items contribute to the project budget. So our architecture, engineering fees, management fees, fixtures, furnishings, equipment, educational technology, testing, and the MSBA also requires us to capture our feasibility study costs in the overall project budget. Even though that's already been accounted for, it's been appropriated, we're spending it, we still have to sort of account for it. And that all adds up to around $94.5 million. Once again, less the MSBA reimbursement, we're looking at a total not to exceed of something no more than $77 million. So then at the bottom, what we've provided for you, and this was literally new as of the weekend, a description for those who perhaps need a little help understanding how we go about raising taxes in Winchester. One option is what some might think of as a permanent override, an operating override, which sort of raises the tax levy limit. We had one, 5 years ago, to support all manner of spending in town. But the alternative is a debt exclusion. And this is what we used for VO, it's what we used for the high school, and it's what we're proposing here. That's a limited term. So it's a taxation on your real estate property, and it goes to pay that debt service. And when that debt service is paid off, the tax goes away. So some more information for you here. The median value home in Winchester, according to the assessor's office, is $1.264 million. And based on those models I shared with you a moment ago, 30 years at 5%, that equates to just under $700 a year. But once again, this could be dependent on a number of things, including interest rate and the ultimate borrowing term as decided by the Select Board. So I'm going to go, as I wrap up, I want you guys to know we also have an FAQ page. If you have questions, if anybody has questions on the project, you can send an email to this address, lynch2025faq@gmail.com. Our communications team will take a look, get back to you, answer the question. If it's a frequent question, it goes up here with an answer. So with that, I think I'm done. I'm just going to go back to the home page. If there are questions about process with MSBA, Andy is here. Design questions, Charlie's here, educational program operations, Frank, and of course we've got a lot of EFPBC members here as well. So hope you'll not be shy about coming up. If you would, for Andy, who I think is taking notes tonight, just if you've got questions, introduce yourself, let us know what street you live on, and we'll take a note of your questions. Thank you.
I'll get this started. I'm Ed Valeriano. I live at 6 Royal Street, so right at the entrance to Lynch. I got a ton of questions. I have to say I'm aware of this meeting, but I haven't been to the website or followed it closely. So I had a few questions. I mean, they're for different people, but my first question is, obviously the high school is recently done, VO is recently done. So what learnings were taken from these two recent projects that are being applied, you know, for this new construction? Kind of like, did anything inform how this construction is going to be done versus how these were done? Like, did we learn anything from it? My other question is on the flooding. I know I'm right on the border with the flooding, and so I don't know if what the thinking and what has been done about that for this new construction project. My other question is, how likely is it that it's going to stay on this timeline? It looked like a 2-year start to finish timeline. Is that, you know, pretty much what happened for the high school and for VO, or is that aggressive? Like, I don't know how conservative or how likely that is, kind of a thing. And then my other question is, how are the construction vehicles managed? You know, when this all happens, like, you know, it's a small neighborhood entrance. I don't know if they're all going to come, how they're all going to get in and out of there, kind of a thing. So, and I know that there's a traffic meeting also happening tomorrow for our neighborhood, so, which I'll be at as well. So just to kick it off, just a few questions.
So I'm happy to take those in reverse order, but only a couple of those, and I'm going to warn Charlie. I'm going to ask him to stand up in a minute. Some of your questions really speak to the means and methods of construction. We don't have a contractor on board just yet, but the design team has sort of shared some of your concerns. Actually, I'm going to take them in the order that you asked. So in terms of lessons learned, the high school project and VO are so different beyond just how they visually appear. One is so much larger than the other. The Vincent Owen project was what we call design, bid, build with a general contractor. We broke that into 2 separate packages to make it more attractive to the general contractor. This building was delivered in an entirely different way called construction management at risk. So it's a very different construct, and it involves different sort of parties in the design. The EFPBC feels like it was yesterday, but we had some, was it over the summer, I guess? We had lengthy discussions and debates because this was a decision we had to make. What will the project delivery method be? What are the constraints? What are the opportunities, but the challenges about the site and this project that may drive us to say we either want a construction manager at risk or we don't? So we had a lot of conversation about that. I don't know that, there's one thing, let's say, that went right or wrong that directly sort of impresses us with respect to the Lynch project. I would say on the VO project, and we did have a couple of surprises. We had some cost overruns with respect to hazardous materials. We found some hot materials in places we didn't think we would, but we addressed that with all sorts of contingencies, and Charlie could, certainly speak to that. In both projects, we had a pretty robust educational programming process, and that was no exception in this instance. So Frank, you may also want to just speak about educational programming here because, Frank is fairly new as superintendent in Winchester, but he has a lot of experience in school construction and also with the MSBA. Your question about flooding, I might also ask Charlie to speak to. This is also a subject of interest and concern, by the EFPBC, and we talk about it quite a bit. I think we feel very confident about the timeline, quite confident, actually. And construction vehicles, yeah, that's almost more like something we could engage with the contractor, but our architect certainly has thought forward about, so where would site access be? And what are the consequences of that? So for instance, the school committee wanted not to lose access to the fields north of the building. So how can we make that still possible while we're building a school? So we've been in conversation with management and the rec department about some limited access on the east side of the site. I believe that's right, so that this portion of the site can be closed off for construction access. So we don't really have concrete answers for you right now. As Charlie said, we're barely 25% into the design of the project, but those are all really good considerations that the EFPBC thinks about it. But Charlie, do you want to say a few words either about lessons learned, either on VO or other projects you're doing, flooding, and Frank, any thoughts about sort of educational program for Lynch?
Yeah. Frank requests more time.
No, he
So the-
yielded his time.
Oh, yielded his time. I thought he was considering his on flooding. So the site does have a floodplain. It has a 500-year floodplain and a 100-year floodplain. The building is proposed as outside of both of those floodplains. You can't.
Keep talking. I'll pull it up.
Well, yeah, no, I like the other one.
Oh, you like the other one?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll leave it.
Because the other one shows you the blue line, and the blue line is the floodplain line. So anyway, you could conceivably, you can build within a 500-year floodplain. But the problem, of course, is, as we all sort of intuitively know, a 500-year floodplain may become a 100-year floodplain in another 50 years. So the intent here is to stay well out of it. We also have a riverfront setback we need to respect, and we have a wetland resource that we need to respect. So the building is being held as far to the to the west as we can off of the brook. We are reducing the amount of pervious material that's there now, so it'll be less. The building is being pulled farther back than the existing Lynch. So all of that has been considered. It has been modeled as well. So that's sort of the answer there. In terms of lessons learned, we did hear a comment on Thursday morning about, we've had overheating problems at the VO. Is that going to happen again? We are well aware of those issues, and we do not expect that to happen again. The building will be air-conditioned. It's going to have a pretty sophisticated mechanical system and sophisticated controls, so that's a good lesson learned. And I think that, you know, we're all ears if there are other things that we need to be very careful about, but it is true, as Chris talked you through the various delivery methods of construction, and this is going to be a design bid build, and it has its own set of challenges. You have to have extremely good documents because they're not going to give you much of a break because they've gotten the job because of their aggressive bidding in the first place. And that is very different than the high school project. And what was the other question? Contractor access. So we can define, the site will be fenced off, and there will be specific gates for contractors to enter. Once they're on the site, they're going to have essentially control of that fenced-in area like any construction process. But hopefully it will be made safe, it will be monitored, and we can control a little bit. I mean, I think they're going to access the site the way you do now, and they'll have lay-down space and the like. And we will, I think the decision about whether to try to maintain any access to the north has not fully been vetted and made yet. It has to be kind of resolved. I don't know if that answered those questions. And then in terms of programming, we did have a very robust, to speak for Frank because he yielded his time, we did have a very robust, early on robust kind of programming sessions with faculty, staff, community members. And as the project moves forward, if it does, there will be multiple rounds, particularly with teachers, educators, staff, to really vet the design, make sure that we're specifically addressing their concerns about space and what they need in their spaces. So that would be coming if the project moves forward, most certainly, as will, discussions with continuing, we've already had them, but continuing discussions with town department heads and with all of the professional departments in town, including obviously Conservation Commission and environmental considerations, but public safety, police and fire, of course, first responders, planning, all the other, and obviously inspectional services, all the departments in town that are involved in projects like this will be consulted. So that's part of that process as well.
Hi, I'm Kara. Can you hear me? I live on Wendell Street, and I'm interested in hearing more about the swing space. So the timeline, it looked like, will the kids start at Lynch and then transition in the middle of the school year? And then if the construction extends, will they stay in the swing space? Because, just thinking about the kids, what that transition will look like. And then also, if Parkhurst looks like the only backup plan, can somebody explain to me what the module classrooms are and sort of how that works?
Sure. Let me try. I'm Frank Hackett, superintendent. Yep. Great question. So the swing space conversation at Parkhurst is still in development. We've been talking about how many modulars we would need right now. We believe and have asked TAP A to plan on 14 modular units on the site, but that's still in process. That is, from our perspective, kind of the maximum number that we can get on that site and still feel relatively comfortable on the site.
Like a line?
So it would be a lot, if you're familiar with Parkhurst and you are looking at the existing modular, they would be coming out toward the street off the end of that existing modular unit that's there now. So I met with staff today. We had a good turnout, lengthy discussions, and some of the same questions. There's still a lot to plan for. We still don't really know what our enrollment projections look like yet. So in terms of, what, if we have a backup plan, I assume you mean if there were additional enrollments or
like if Parkhurst didn't work for some reason?
It's going to work. It's going to work beautifully. It has to work.
Dr. Doug.
Yeah, we don't foresee any reason why it won't work. It's been done before, obviously. The timeline is a little bit in question just in terms of the modular units, I think, as much as anything, and the procurement of those. But Hill International has been working hard on that, and we have emphasized the importance of the September date, which would mean we would want to have that site ready to have teachers come into around, I would love to say early August, but by mid-August or so. And then we'll just be planning to move over the course of the next several months. A lot of questions from teachers about that today, like as specific as when can we start to get boxes. So we will continue the planning process, and as more information becomes available, we'll update people.
And then another question about after school. Will there be an after school program there? Like, will WinRec be there, or will all the kids go to WinRec? Do you guys know anything about that?
I know a little bit about it. We would want to have an on-site after-school program just for convenience for parents, obviously, and really there's no other location to take them at this point. But I've been working with Nick, who's a rec department director, and we've already begun those conversations about what that might look like or not look like. And but the plan would be to have a after-school, before-school on-site. Sure.
And then if it extends, you'll just, like, if the construction isn't done, then will it just kids
Correct. We have no other waiting use behind this project for Parkhurst. So if we were in a scenario where the project ran over, the Lynch project ran over, the students would stay there, and then we'd figure out what the best time to move would be. But the good thing is when we move in, it's a turnkey facility. So the furniture's all there. It's just instructional materials. This first move is a little bit more complicated because we're going to bring stuff out of Lynch with us to Parkhurst.
Thank you.
Sure.
And just to underscore a point Frank was making, I'm going to go to the swing space page once more. I think for some of you who are wondering, how on earth is that all going to fit? We should just be really clear. This like Little League field back here, you see the diamond? It's really in not very good condition. This becomes a parking lot when we use this for swing space. It has to, because we're going to use so much of this for modular classrooms, and we also need space for play spaces for kids outdoors. So our understanding with management is this will be used as a temporary parking lot, and are making pretty big investment in this area to manage stormwater. There's a lot of grade change here for those who live in this area. You're very familiar. And then when the project is complete and those modulars go away, we don't own them. We will lease them. That's what we did here at the high school. So we basically have to rent them for 24 months. When those go away, the parking lot will be torn up, and we're looking at, how can you build sort of a temporary parking lot to minimize the cost, but it's got to be plowable and so forth. But when all is said and done, we're going to go back and rebuild the field, and it will be in better shape when that's all over than the field that we have today. But that's not going to happen until those kids are out and into Lynch for the fall of '25.
Hi, Brian Vernalia. I live on Sargent Road, so quite far away from this and all the recent buildings in town. In full disclosure, I'm also on the finance committee in town. This is a beautiful looking building, and I'm really excited, and it's time to happen. It's also a really expensive building. What options are there for continued value engineering of this building to either see it not be whatever that number was? I don't want to misquote the final number. Some things look lovely, like the way the rooms are like at angles. That's got to be more expensive than making a straight wall. So I'm just curious, what are the things that you guys are looking at or could continue to look at to make this still what will be the nicest elementary school in the town, but cost a little less?
Brian, thank you for your question. I'm going to let Charlie address the sawtooth elevation in a moment, but I'll just summarize by saying that that sort of triangular space is actually doing something for us programmatically in terms of breakout space. And in my own experience, what really adds cost are curves. So an angled wall is still a straight wall. But I'll let Charlie sort of speak to that in a minute. So I'm glad you asked this question. We talked a little bit about this on Thursday as well. So there's value engineering, which is, are there design decisions you can make that sort of accomplish the same goal, but for less money? there are a lot of those decisions that have actually already been made. Some of the exterior materials that you see in that carousel, that exterior view, we're using jumbo brick on the project, right, Charlie? So jumbo brick, literally an extra large brick, so we have fewer units of masonry. That means that brings down the labor cost. It also helps break down the scale of the building. But when that image pops up again, you'll also notice we kind of have this kind of tan base in some areas of the building. That's a product called Arriscraft. And in all of my projects, Arriscraft is the material we went to when we were value engineering, and we're sort of starting with it right now. But out of concern for, I mean, the elephant in the room is just all the cost escalation that's been happening, right, associated with COVID. So I want to say a couple of points about this. For those who haven't been following it, by and large, most raw materials have already fallen back to their pre-pandemic cost levels. This is good news. If you were reading the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago, the cost of lumber has actually fallen 70% since March. It is back to pre-pandemic levels. This is great news. What remains to be seen is how are these sort of cost collapses going to, or how are they manifesting themselves today in bids? And that's, I think, a question everybody rolls out of bed in the morning and wants to know. Jay's in the electrical contracting business, and he's very aware of a lot of pieces and parts. Manufacturers are still struggling to, supply some basic elements. They think they're still months away. So we have supply chain issues. As Charlie laid out that schedule, we're not ready to go to bid. So what I am cautiously optimistic for is all of the conservative moves we've made in terms of project budgeting are actually going to reap some huge rewards for us, because by the time we're bidding, and who knows kind of what the labor market is, because that's a very different animal, as you know. But my hope is that simply with respect to the cost of materials, there will be some margin there, and that may be realized in some lower bids. But I want to say a couple of quick things. These numbers that I shared with you tonight, and they are large. This construction cost, $65.4 million. This is just for the new building. Included in that number is a 10% design contingency. So that's not any particular item that the cost estimator picked up. That's a 10% design contingency. In addition, we're carrying a construction contingency. I think it's a 10% construction contingency, right, Charlie? We're carrying an owner's contingency. And I'll shut up and I'll ask Charlie to sort of share with you kind of what we're doing with respect to escalation, cost escalation to the bid date, and what some of those assumptions are, and then he can answer your question about angled walls. How about that? It's not the first time he's gotten the question.
Yes, so the estimators are presuming significant amount. So in years past, estimators would sort of presume maybe 3% a year in escalation. We're now more than doubling that to try to keep up with construction costs. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of this may seem expensive, but we are in a remarkably difficult construction market to manage, and it's just the unfortunate reality of the timing of this project. And you have many other sister communities close at hand who are having the exact same conversation, the exact same problem. Our estimators, who are customarily expect to be estimating below the actual bid, this year, for the first time in a decade, are finding that bids are coming in above their estimates on average of 10+%. It's just, and this is, cost of raw materials may be coming down, but we still have a labor availability issue. But it's very, I was talking to Jay before the meeting about this. It's very hard to explain some of this. It isn't all rational, but we're really struggling with it. So we're trying our very best to bring some certainty to this process, which is in really uncharted territory, and try to do the best we can to crystal ball gaze, look at the future and try to understand where these numbers are going to be in a year. I don't think that there is a lot of value engineering we can do on a school like this that would dramatically change the complexion of the number. There are things you can do around the edges, as Chris said. You can change materials, but really, you know, in the building world, money is in square footage, size. You want a cheaper building, make it half as big. And, you know, that's just the reality of it. We can't do that because if you want to, unless you decide you don't want to partner with the MSBA, because the MSBA requires certain program spaces for the population of the school. So we can't make it smaller. So there's not a lot of luxury here in terms of something like the bay that you mentioned that was mentioned. That we already looked at that. We don't think there's a big premium there. The fact of the matter is you'd have windows whether it was angled or whether it wasn't angled. We're not adding a bunch of perimeter wall. We're not adding any structure. We're not heating or cooling any more or less space. So, you know, the architectural benefits, in our view, kind of outweigh the possibility of some very nominal cost increase, but I don't think there's a lot there. And, you know, there are flat roofs. It's actually a pretty simple building as best we can make it, but it's also, again, a complicated site. We've got a lot of constraints, and so we have the building is shaped to fit the only area that it can truly fit and support the program. So, you know, we will continue. So one of the good things about the MSBA process, which this building went through, which the VO went through, is that the MSBA insists on multiple cost estimates as you go along, and their expectation is that we will VE to the budget at each stage. So there are a lot of controls. There's a lot of eyeballs. At each stage, there are multiple estimates, one by Hill, one by TAP-A. Those are reconciled. So there's always a second opinion relative to controlling costs. So it's a controlled process. It's a responsible process. The cost is revisited at every single milestone submission. It isn't, you know, a private job. An owner could say, oh, don't worry about it. But with the MSBA, you're forced to do that. They insisted on doing that, and they should. You know, it's a public building. It's taxpayer dollars. And that is the way it should be done. But it does follow a pretty rigorous review process around cost all the way through.
Would just add one point, because I think we have done a good job at this point also talking about the fact that we have a district-wide preschool program in this building. So 7 classroom spaces on that first level are dedicated to a district-wide preschool program, students from all over the district. It has its own separate entrance. It has its own separate administrative suite, a nurse's office, and area for the nurse to be with kids, and a separate play structure. So there are design elements in this building that are not insignificant. 7 preschool classrooms, 1,500 square feet apiece or so. So just in classroom space, it's over 10,000 square feet of space. I think we need to continue to emphasize that to all of you and to the public, because that is a program that is specialized for the district, and it's really unique for us. Even though we have district-wide programs in special education, they generally don't need this kind of dedicated space. In fact, it is a significant amount of space that we're designating to this program, and it will help us expand the program moving forward. So I just want to make sure that we continue to keep that on the radar for everybody, to make sure they understand that, you know, there's a lot of square footage dedicated to a district-wide program.
Vincent Owen Elementary School was designed for 420 students. We expanded it by 3.5 classrooms 2.5 years after it opened. But out of the box, that building, and what we did is we basically fit up the shell space. We built shell space into the lower level of that building. So there was no real expansion of the footprint. We built in some expansion into VO. But the building that you see from Johnson Road was designed for 420 students. This building is designed for between 520 to 530 students K-5, and that does not include the preschool program. And the preschool program is not only a district-wide program, as Dr. Hackett mentioned, but we are expanding it. As Brian and Michelle are well aware, and others in the room, if you've been preschool parents, we have been running a wait list for years because we don't have space, which is a real challenge for us because it's an integrated preschool program. So for students who have some identified disabilities, some development disabilities, whether they're specifically diagnosed or not, it's a great program to get those kids in with some of their peers and to get a little more data. And that's very difficult when those spaces are limited. So the program is going to be expanded operationally and physically, and so we're talking about a pretty robust program on top of, 110 more elementary kids than we had at VO. So it just underscores Charlie's point. It's not a small building. It's a big school, which adds significantly to part of why the price is what the price is. If it was the size of VO, it would be a lot less money, for sure. So 7:35, we can wrap up. If there are no other questions. Can I just ask, was this helpful? Is this format helpful? Is the website helpful? If you guys have questions or comments on the website, you think something is really poorly laid out and looks ridiculous, I hope you'll, send an email to Lynch 2025 FAQ@gmail.com. Let us know, and we try to keep this updated on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And the other thing I forgot to mention is the EFPBC. We meet Monday evenings, usually twice a month. If town meeting says yes and the voters say yes, we'll probably be meeting more frequently than that. We do meet remotely over Zoom. You can find our schedule on the government calendar. We always have public comment at the beginning of the meeting, and we welcome public comment. So don't be a stranger to the process. Nobody else has any questions? How about a motion to adjourn? I'll second. Aye. Thank you all very much for coming tonight.